On a crisp fall morning, we are buzzing across New Hampshire's Great Bay, looking for something we'd not seen before.
From the surface, I just see all these dark spots.
Yep.
And the dark spots are?
These are oyster condos, just a type of cage that happens to hold these bags. These bags hold the oysters. So all of these dark spots you see behind me, they're just rows of oysters with bags in them.
Our guide is Laura Brown of Fox Point Oysters. She's turned what was a lifeless mudflat into an eco-friendly, protein-producing farm.
So lift this lid up with me. We're just going to toss it over this way. Very gently, just wiggle it first to get out of the mud. Okay, now we can lift it up. There you go. So there's some life.
Oysters are farmed because 85% of the naturally occurring oyster reefs in the world no longer exist. And what you may have forgotten from junior high biology is these little bivalves are more effective than the filter on your faucet.
They're just like nature's little pumps. And they help filter the water out so that the sunlight can come through and the water is clear so that any habitat that needs to form can form.
One oyster filters 50 gallons of water a day. 50 gallons. Hard to imagine.
And this was an unused mudflat, so the farm is creating a really nice habitat for a whole bunch of different species in here too.
For Brown, growing earth-friendly, people-pleasing oysters is a gratifying way to make a living. Same story across the water in Little Bay.
This is your farm?
Yes, it's 4.5 acres and of heaven.
Brian Giannacco doesn't mind getting wet and spending most every day tending the condos. He says the hard work has paid off.
Last year was a really good year. This year we were set up to double what we did last year in terms of oyster sales.
But then came the COVID close down. Restaurants with doors locked or at reduced capacity. Giannacco had no choice but to turn to retail.
So all of a sudden you have to go into the retail business. Was it enough to compensate for your loss of all your wholesale business?
No, it wasn't.
To the rescue, the Nature Conservancy and the Pew Charitable Trust, buying up 5 million oysters. Oysters that will be transplanted to restored reefs in 7 states.
And we're going to deploy those oysters on at least 20 restoration sites in those 7 states and rebuild at least 27 acres of oyster reefs in the process.
Natural oyster reefs.
Natural oyster reefs, oyster sanctuaries that can't be harvested.
A win-win, as they say.
Be free!
So Nature Conservancy comes along and says, hey, we want to buy up some of your oysters.
Yeah.
When you heard that, what'd you think?
Oh, yes, please. That sounds great. There's a lot of oysters. If you can't sell them fast enough, they get too big. Because you can't just stop your farm.
Yeah.
They're growing. So knowing that they were going to buy them was a huge lifesaver, huge.
When an oyster gets too big, it's hard to sell. So this infusion of cash will help 100 farmers like Laura and Brian.
Is this satisfying work?
Absolutely. One of my favorite things is to go to an event and shuck oysters for people and get to watch them enjoy, what you've done. You spent 3 years growing that oyster. They have no idea, that oyster's been through your hands umpteen times, from this time it was, the pepper flake that you brought in to this beautiful 3-inch round oyster. And it's pretty incredible.
And as long as we were in the neighborhood.
And for those of you at home and wanting to know if it's hard to shuck an oyster, not so tough.
You're like a pro.
Not so tough.
I'm impressed.
Salty.
So if you're someplace in the middle of the country saying, I'm too far away from the coast to get a good oyster, there are places that we'll have on our website where you can actually order the oysters and get them 24 hours later. And I suggest you get one of these little babies. All you have to do is look at the hinge. There's a hinge right there. You put the shucker in the hinge.
We lift it up.
Just kind of, listen. Of course, because I'm trying to do this live on television.
But you also don't want to cut yourself.
No. Exactly right. Anyway, it's doable.
Cool.
Thank you, Harry. That's great. What a great idea, too. Way to go. Pew Charitable Trust.
Order the oysters and you get them 24 hours later. It's quite amazing.
I'm going
All in a
online.
room.
I'm getting those bad boys.
You're a big oyster guy.
I love them. Nick, and my son Nick, we will put down about 3 dozen at a sitting.
Oh, I love that.
And Savannah's sitting there saying,
But you know what? I see they come with fries sometimes, and I like that.
That's true. Very true.
So there's a little something for everybody.
There we go.
And I'm super happy to hear how that all worked out. A real win-win.
Aquaculture.
Yes.
Thank you, Harry.
Thanks, Harry.